Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the incredibly complex, completely fascinating, and hugely consequential career of Indira Gandhi. We're going to examine her legacy using only documented facts and historical records pulled straight from our sources. So no spin here, just a deep dive into the history. Okay, let's jump right in with the big central question. How exactly did a leader, someone initially dismissed by her own party bosses as a gungi guriya, literally a dumb doll, transform into a figure so powerful she became known globally as the Iron Lady of India? It's this massive, fascinating paradox. And to figure it out, we really need to go back to the very beginning of her premiership.
Part 1. The Reluctant Successor.
Talk about a massive gap between expectation and reality, right? On one hand, you had the political syndicate, these veteran Congress Party bosses. They essentially orchestrated Gandhi's rise to power after the sudden death of Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri in 1966, basically because they thought she'd be weak and easy to control. But the reality? Vastly different. Almost immediately, she crushed the 1966 Mizo National Front uprising, and then, by 1969, she completely blindsided those same political rivals by boldly nationalizing 14 major banks. And get this, she did it without even consulting her own finance minister. This severe political miscalculation is perfectly captured by Congress President K. Kamaraj and the syndicate. They literally thought a woman would be an ideal tool for them to pull the strings. Well, instead, Gandhi systematically stripped them of their power. She ultimately split the Congress Party in 1969 to form her own faction and held on to power by brilliantly building regional alliances. So yeah, she was absolutely nobody's puppet.
Which brings us to Part 2, War and Triumph.
Things escalated incredibly fast in late 1971. A massive independence movement and a brutal crackdown had erupted in East Pakistan, which we now know as Bangladesh. India actually provided covert support to the rebels at first. Then, on November 22nd, Indian and Pakistani jets engaged in the Boira dogfight. Shortly after, on December 3rd, Pakistan launched Operation Chengiz Khan, a preemptive strike on Indian air bases. Gandhi's response? She immediately declared a state of emergency and ordered a full-scale invasion. Her generals used lightning war tactics, completely bypassing opposition strongholds. This all culminated on December 11th with the Tangail airdrop, literally the largest airborne operation since World War II. They dropped 750 paratroopers to secure a route to Dhaka, forcing the ultimate surrender just days later on December 16th.
To really grasp the sheer scale of this victory, just look at this staggering number, 93,000. That is the number of Pakistani prisoners of war captured by Indian and Allied forces. Let that sink in for a second. It was the largest military surrender since the Second World War. This victory ended a horrific genocide in East Pakistan, birthed the independent nation of Bangladesh, and firmly cemented India as the undisputed regional power in South Asia. Domestically, the response was absolutely phenomenal. Even opposition leaders were hailing Gandhi as goddess Durga.
So she took this massive wartime popularity and strategically paired it with something just as powerful back home. The opposition had basically formed an alliance around a single two-word manifesto, Indira Hatao, meaning remove Indira. Well, she brilliantly countered with Garibi Hatao, meaning remove poverty. And this wasn't just some catchy slogan, it came packed with central government-funded anti-poverty programs. This allowed her to completely bypass the traditional dominant rural castes and build this massive independent base of national support directly among the urban and rural poor, a real political masterstroke.
Part 3. The State of Emergency.
Everything really shifted on June 12, 1975. The Allahabad High Court actually found Gandhi guilty of electoral malpractice tied to her 1971 campaign. They voided her election and banned her from running for office for 6 years. But rather than stepping down, she dug her heels in. She pointed the finger right back at the opposition, claiming, as you see in her own words, that the situation was very much worse when they were the ones forming governments. Naturally, news of this verdict sparked widespread unrest, leading to massive opposition protests led by prominent figures like Jayaprakash Narayan.
In response to all this unrest, on June 25, 1975, the President of India, acting directly on Gandhi's recommendation, declared a state of emergency, citing internal disorder. The sheer speed and totality with which basic civil liberties were just suspended was entirely unprecedented. Using constitutional emergency powers under Article 352, she enacted President's Rule, which meant taking direct federal control over opposition-led state governments. Police were suddenly given sweeping powers to impose curfews. The press was hit with heavy censorship. State assembly elections were indefinitely postponed, and she just began ruling by decree without any parliamentary debate whatsoever.
To truly understand the heavy weight of this emergency period, you really just have to look at the human toll. Over 100,000. That's how many political opponents, journalists, trade unionists, and dissenters were thrown into prison during this time. Basic constitutional rights were completely frozen. It was a staggering crackdown.
Which leads right into Part 4, Ousted and Exiled.
This unprecedented centralization of power, combined with the unchecked extra-constitutional rise of her younger son, Sanjay Gandhi, who was essentially helping run a police state, set the stage for a really sudden downfall. In 1977, after extending the emergency twice, Gandhi finally called for elections. She probably misjudged her own popularity, maybe from reading a heavily censored press for 2 years, and the collapse of her political capital was utter and absolute. Going from a commanding 350 seats in the Lok Sabha in 1971, the Congress Party was completely decimated, knocked down to just 153 seats. For the very first time in India's history, the Congress Party lost power.
The opposition had unified under the Janata Alliance, and they successfully framed that 1977 election around one incredibly stark existential choice: democracy and dictatorship. And that message resonated deeply with the Indian public. The defeat was so humiliating that both Indira Gandhi and her son Sanjay actually lost their own personal parliamentary seats.
But we're not done yet. Part 5, the dramatic return. It seemed like her career was permanently over, right? But you could never really count her out. Her stunning comeback unfolded in 3 distinct phases. Step 1, that Janata Party coalition that ousted her, it was incredibly fragile, and it quickly started suffering from internal politicking and weak governance. Step 2, Gandhi brilliantly capitalized on all that chaos. Instead of an authoritarian, she projected herself to the public as a strong, experienced, stable leader who could restore order. And step 3, it actually worked. In the January 1980 elections, her faction of the party secured an absolute landslide majority, putting her right back in the prime minister's seat.
Ultimately, she would serve as prime minister until her tragic assassination on October 31, 1984. All told, she spent 15 years and 350 days in office across 4 different terms. That cumulative tenure makes her the second longest-serving prime minister in Indian history, a record matched only by her own father, Jawaharlal Nehru.
As we wrap up this explainer, we want to leave you with one final provocative question. How do we even begin to weigh a legacy like this? I mean, the history books give us a leader who championed the rural poor with Garibi Hatao, who boldly restructured the economy, and who secured historic, literal, map-altering geopolitical victories. Yet, this is the exact same leader who suspended democracy, jailed over 100,000 dissenters, and ruled by decree. It is an immensely complicated history, driven by sheer political willpower. Thank you so much for joining us as we unpack the facts behind the Iron Lady of India.